Our third and final speaker is Regan Brewer. Regan is the president of Jane Addams Resource Corporation. Regan will share her thoughts on where and how to secure the next generation of talent, with a focus on diversifying the workforce to ensure inclusivity and belonging. Please welcome to the stage, Regan Brewer.
So for the last couple of decades, we have been talking about the decline of U.S. manufacturing. And quite frankly, I'm a bit tired of it. So I'm excited to share that we're now seeing a resurgence of American manufacturing. We're seeing a comeback. And that's really helpful and critical to the broader U.S. economy. We can look at things like the multiplier effect. And basically, the multiplier effect indicates that for every dollar spent in manufacturing in the U.S., another $2.70 gets added to the broader economy. So manufacturing is critical to the greater economy here. But amidst this resurgence, companies are facing a workforce and skills shortage. Today, I'm going to show you how unconventional workforce strategies can not only solve labor shortages, but also revitalize communities and drive innovation in our manufacturing sector. Now, a lot of companies turn to my organization for help with their labor challenges. I work for the Jane Addams Resource Corporation, or JARC, and we believe in supporting the manufacturing sector because it's not just good for our economy, but it's a source of high-quality jobs and careers. So at JARC, we provide job training, consulting, and upskilling for job seekers, production workers, and manufacturing companies. And we target skills that workers need to execute production tasks. Those are things like welding, CNC, assembly, CAD/CAM, automation, and robotics. And so we help companies source talent pipelines that they may not have been previously connected to. So as we welcome this manufacturing resurgence, we believe that companies will need to seek out and form new partnerships and alliances to meet their demand for skilled labor. And I'm going to give you 3 examples of workforce challenges that are facing our industry partners. First, I'm going to take you to my hometown of Chicago. Now, Friedman Seating Company is a 130-year-old family-owned business on the west side of Chicago. And they make seats for mass transit. So think buses and trains. And if you've sat on a public bus or train, you've probably sat on one of their seats. Prior to COVID, they had about 900 workers on the west side of Chicago. And when COVID hit, they lost about 300 of those workers. They just stopped coming to work. And so as you can imagine, this was devastating to being able to get product out the door. This problem was not unique to Friedman Seating, but we were also facing a critical skills shortage prior to COVID in the manufacturing sector. In fact, Deloitte was predicting that by 2028, we were going to have about 2.4 million positions unfilled in the manufacturing sector. That's over half of all open positions. So, the pandemic hits, workers stop showing up, Friedman Seating loses about 1/3 of their workforce. So what does a company that has been in business for over a century know how to do? They know how to rapidly adapt, and that's what they did. So they introduced new technologies and equipment like robots and cobots. And one of the areas where that was very particularly felt was in their welding shop. And so if you were to walk their welding shop floor today, you would see humans working alongside of robots and cobots. Now, my organization trains workers for positions at Friedman Seating Company, and over the past few years, we've placed over 100 people there. A lot of welders and assemblers. And because their workplace evolved, our training had to evolve as well. So in collaboration with Friedman Seating, we have designed our own automation and robotics curriculum, and we have invested in our own equipment. So when a company in Chicago makes their investment in automation, they will know that we will have a talent pipeline to meet their needs. And all of our programs are designed in tandem with our industry partners. We want to not only be able to meet their demands, but also ensure that we're setting workers up for success. And one of the workers that comes to mind is Antonio. So Antonio is from the west side of Chicago. After graduating from high school, he was sort of aimlessly riding the bus one day, kind of near Friedman Seating Company, and he ran into a former classmate of his who asked him kind of a big question, and that was, what are you doing with your life? And he didn't have an answer. He basically said nothing. And so, fortunately, that person told him about JARC, and he was able to enroll in our CNC program. He found his calling in machining, and he is now what I refer to as a machine shop junkie. He cannot get enough. And so he has been placed in a manufacturing company many years ago, a pretty large CNC department, and he ended up learning basically every machine in that shop. He couldn't take him out of a machine shop. And so now he's a master CNC machinist, but he's also an instructor, and he's giving back to his community to help others that were once in his shoes. So Antonio is helping to train the future workforce to be successful in highly automated manufacturing environments like Friedman Seating Company. And I'm here to tell you that by forging the right alliances in your community, you may be able to find your future talent pool. And I'm going to come back to that towards the end. Now I'm going to take you to the smallest state in our nation, lovely Rhode Island. Now, Rhode Island has a really robust manufacturing sector. They have over 1,400 firms, and they make a wide variety of products there. So this is everything from toys to HVAC systems, jewelry to submarines. And companies here are also struggling to attract talent, but they're also struggling to retain their workers. So a couple of years ago, we were engaged by a manufacturing company that makes high-end luxury goods. And they have a very large CNC department with a lot of talented workers from very entry-level up to very highly skilled. But what they didn't have in place was a clearly defined career pathway within their CNC department. And they also didn't have professional development or training in place for workers that wanted to advance. So they came to my organization, and we were able to conduct an assessment of their entire CNC department. For each employee, we identified their skill set, and we identified what skills they would need in order to advance to the next level. And as we were doing that, a clear career pathway emerged, and we were able to articulate and codify that for the company. And then we provided the training. So after a few years, we've trained 125 workers, and we're really excited that the company has reported that they have had increased retention amongst the group of workers that we've trained. And not only that, a quarter of those workers have increased their skill sets enough to be promoted. So someone that has benefited from these types of career pathway opportunities is someone like Danielle. Now, Danielle, I'm not going to lie, she had a rough childhood. She actually grew up around gangs. And that led to some criminal activity, which landed her in prison. And when she became incarcerated, she lost custody of her 3 little kids. And so, as heartbreaking as that was, she was determined to turn her incarceration into something positive. While she was incarcerated, she ended up in the prison machine shop, and she learned how to fix the machines. She became really good at it. So when she got paroled, she basically had 2 goals. One was to get custody of her kids back. And 2, she knew she needed to get a job that would support that goal. But the problem was she had never worked in manufacturing, she didn't know where to start, she had a gap in her work history, and she had a felony. So she came to JARC, and she was able to combine her industrial maintenance skills with CNC machining skills. And we helped her land a job with a company that was willing to take a risk on a woman with a felony and a spotty work history. So Danielle was able to get a car, she was able to get an apartment, and eventually she got custody of her kids back. And throughout the years, she has worked her way up within her company. They've afforded her a lot of opportunities to grow and develop. So, like the individuals that we trained at that company in Rhode Island, Danielle has been able to advance. And she now makes 6 figures, and she's living in the suburbs, very typical suburban lifestyle. So from prison to the suburbs, it was really this manufacturing career pathway that made that possible. Now, my last story, I'm going to start with a tragedy, but I'm going to end with hope and optimism. I'm going to take you to Baltimore. If you're like me, you watched on March 26 when the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapsed. It was quite surreal, especially if you spent any time in Baltimore. Now, 6 lives were tragically lost, and the Maryland economy came to a halt. And in order to understand why that happened, you need to understand a bit of geography. Now, on the eastern side of the Key Bridge is an area called Sparrows Point. And Sparrows Point was once home to Bethlehem Steel. And Bethlehem Steel had this entire area of land. And at its height, they were the largest producer of steel in the world, with over 20,000 workers at one point. And sadly, in the mid-90s, after 140 years in business, they closed their doors. So this had a devastating impact on the greater economy of Baltimore. Generations of families had built their lives off of Bethlehem Steel. And so this was another symbol of the decline of American manufacturing. But the narrative at Sparrows Point today has changed. And it's no longer this symbol of the dying of American manufacturing. We have Governor Westmore, who has set a bold goal of 100% renewable energy for Maryland by 2035. That's less than 10 years away. And we cannot get there without the offshore wind energy sector. So fortunately, U.S. Wind has stepped in and will be building an 80,000-acre farm off the eastern shore of Maryland. And to do that, they're bringing steel back to Sparrows Point, the former home of Bethlehem Steel. They're going to need to hire thousands of workers to get this done, and a lot of those are going to be welders. So we have partnered with U.S. Wind so that we can ensure that we are properly preparing our trainees for these new positions. And it's our hope that Baltimore City residents will be able to get in on the ground floor of this emerging sector. And I'm talking about people like Cinnamon. Cinnamon is a Baltimore City resident. She was working in retail, living at mom and dad's house, wondering how she was ever going to get out of mom and dad's house on a minimum wage salary. And while her dad worked in the trades, she never really saw herself following in his footsteps. But she took a chance on our welding program, and today she's a welder. And one of the things I love about Cinnamon, if you were to ask her what it's like working in a male-dominated field, she would say, challenge me. Challenge me to do anything that a man in this field can do. And so it's going to come down to exposing Baltimore City residents like Cinnamon to opportunities in manufacturing and construction so that we can not only rebuild the Key Bridge, but we can build the wind turbines that we'll need in order to achieve Maryland's audacious energy goals. Now, I want to leave you with 3 recommendations for finding and retaining talent in your communities. And I'm going to give you an acronym because this is workforce development. You have to have an acronym for everything. This is one you can remember. It's CAM. And I'm not talking about computer-aided machining. But first, connect with local resources. In most communities, there are organizations that focus on supporting the manufacturing sector. I would invite you to start with your manufacturing extension partnership. There's an MEP in every state and in Puerto Rico, and they exist to support manufacturers. They offer free services, a wide variety of services that help companies grow and compete globally. Secondly, assess your hiring practices and how you evaluate potential workers. You may be weighing education and continuous work history, but focusing on skills may be more valuable for you. And ask yourself, do your practices allow you to see the valuable skills that a worker brings when applying to your positions? Or could you inadvertently be screening people out that could otherwise do the work that you need done? And lastly, as we heard earlier, create a mentorship program. You can pair experienced workers with new hires, especially those from non-traditional backgrounds. This not only helps create a sense of belonging, it facilitates knowledge transfer and skill development. You can set clear goals and track progress. And this can improve retention, accelerate skills acquisition, and foster innovation by bringing together diverse perspectives. It's really a win-win for the company and for the new hire. So if we work together, we can build a stronger, more inclusive manufacturing sector that drives our economy forward. And this may be a radical statement given where I am today, but the future of manufacturing is not just about robots and automation and AI. It's about people. It's about people like Antonio and Danielle and Cinnamon and their skills and their dreams and potential. So I invite you to join me to unlock that potential, and we can write the next great chapter in American manufacturing. Thank you.
Thank you all for attending the theatre at Autodesk University. Please join me once again in thanking our speakers, Jim Rogers, Jacob Hanna, and Regan Brewer. Thank you again for joining us, and enjoy the rest of AU. Bye, everybody.